Okay, now before we continue with the battery tray and getting that all sorted out, we need to get the carburetor off and get it in and soaking in some cleaning fluids. To do that, you're going to see we've got everything cleaned up, we've got the light in place. I've got a few containers to put the parts in. You don't want to be, there's lots of small bits and you don't want to be losing anything. So I keep some plastic containers around like these yogurt ones that I can put a piece of tape on and mark what the parts are so that nothing gets lost. I also go ahead and I get all my tools laid out, all the stuff I figure I'm going to need, including a roll of masking tape so I can mark the vacuum lines for where they go. So now that that's all done, it's time to get started. Now the first thing to do is to disconnect the throttle and the kickdown linkage. Now be very careful, don't mess with the settings, just carefully unhook them and lay them aside. They're on their own bracket, so you don't need to fuss with it beyond that. So, get our container in place, and we're going to start disconnecting. Okay, that's the transmission cable unhooked. That's the throttle cable. And they're safely set aside. It's really that easy. Now, we need to start unhooking lines. So I'm going to unhook the vacuum line to the booster at the back. And the front fuel line. Now, if these don't come easy, borrow or buy a flare wrench. And a flare wrench is more of a boxy wrench that lets you get a good grip. And you can see on this nut for the fuel line how badly beat up it is. That's from guys trying to take it off using the wrong tool. There we go. A little bit of luck goes a long way. Now we get off the emissions lines. And lay them safely out of the way. Unplug the fast idle solenoid. And then start disconnecting vacuum lines. If in doubt, tape it and mark it where it came off. Always the best school of thought. That way you're not fiddling around trying to figure out where everything is. And gentle with everything as you go. Okay, that looks like everything on that side. Now let's go around and do the other side. Now I'm a little worried on this one. The previous owner had told me tales of changing carburetors innumerable times. And I'm sure hoping this is the original carburetor. He told me it is, so I'm trusting him on that. Okay, looks like we're all disconnected. Now, the carburetor bolts. Ooh, and they're really loose. That's never a good sign. I think we're starting to see some of our reasons for poor running. Ooh, really loose. I think we had even more vacuum leaks than I thought. That's going to be really unfortunate. But nothing we can't fix. Now when you're working on the carburetor, desperately try not to force anything. If a hose is tight, work it. Don't bust it. If a bolt's tight, get some penetrant on it, work it. Don't just yank and twist. The carburetors are pretty tough little beasts, but you really want to watch what you're doing when you're taking them off and putting them back on. Back two. Let's give her a wiggle and see what hoses we missed. Whoop. There we go. And we missed the spring over here. Now leave it in place so you know where it goes back. Oh, a big old vacuum line here that's going to give us a fight. And a smaller one here. There we go. Okay, this one's really going to give us a fight, so that's why. Pliers. There they are. That's why it always pays to take a look. Now once you lift that carburetor, you got to be prepared and be real ready to get the intake covered up. Because if you don't, and you drop something in there, then you're taking the intake manifold off. And we really, really don't want to be doing that. And bear in mind, the whole time you're working on this stuff, you're around fuel. Caution. Keep the lights back. No smoking. Don't be stupid. It's not inherently dangerous as long as you're not doing anything dumb. Wow, this one's giving us a real fight. There we go. Okay. That should be everybody free and clear. Whoop. Missed one. See what we got on that side. That could be the lockup for the torque converter. So we'll just take a quick boo before we bust anything. And sure enough, I got here certainly what it looks like. Okay, I'm just going to get in the book, take a quick look at exactly how that comes off, because it's not obvious. And after doing a little reading, I'm going to pop it off, and we'll have a carburetor in our hand. Be right back on Real Builds. Okay, we've got the carburetor off. You can see how we've stuffed the intake full of rags. We don't want anything falling down there, because if something does, then you got to pull the intake. And if it's actually made it into the cylinder head, then you're pulling heads. So we want to be careful. Our lockup cable was just a clip-on, but I wanted to check. A lockup cable's 30 bucks and a whole bunch of time to put it on. I don't want to break something I don't have to, so we take our time. Now we've got the carburetor off and on the bench. Let's take a look at a couple things we got to do before we put it into solvent to clean it up. Okay, so we took our carb base plate off at the same time. We've just put that with the carb kit and the fuel filter. Here's our carburetor, but there's a few things that have to come off before it goes into the solvent tank. One, anything electrical, like this piece right here, which is the idle solenoid for when it's cold. Okay. This vacuum diaphragm should be okay, and the choke should be okay. We'll just keep those elevated out. But this has got to come off. So we need the right tool for the job. And dive in. You do not want to be submersing electrical components in solvent or rubber components, which is why we're going to have to be careful with the solenoid on the other, the vacuum diaphragm on the other side. We want it so we can get the carb soaked to clean it, scrub it up really well, and then we'll deal with the rest. Again, bits and pieces get put away. There's our idle solenoid. Take another look here and just double check. You know, maybe we will take this off. One less thing to worry about. Now, again, don't start mucking with anything that has an adjustment. The carburetors are pretty forgiving, surprisingly enough, even a more complicated one like the Q-Jet. If it was running good before and the settings were close, then it'll probably continue to run good. This carb, I think the biggest problem is it's filthy dirty. And I don't think it was installed properly. But we'll find out. Okay. Okay, we've got a stripped screw, so I'm going to deal with that and put it in this pile, and then we'll show you how to dump her into the tank here on Real Builds. Okay, so we've got the carb peeled off. We found a bucket that it fits into nicely, and we've got a lid that'll cover everything up. I don't like having solvent inside my shop when I've got other projects on the go. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to soak the carburetor outside underneath this table with the lid on it. Keeps everything away, keeps it safe and sound. So we're going to dump the solvent in, and no, it won't cover the whole carb, but we'll cover as much as we can, and we'll let the carburetor soak for a bit. Now the other thing I do is I also recover all my solvent because I like to reuse it. Solvent itself doesn't wear out, it just gets dirty. Fortunately, it's also reasonably cheap. So, now it can soak in here while we work on the battery tray here on Real Builds. Okay, so we've soaked it for a few hours in solvent, scrubbed the death out of it with brushes and rags and everything else, and got it as clean as possible. Now it's time to start checking stuff. So the first thing we do is find the carburetor number, which is buried right in. Come on, where are you hiding? There we go. Right in here we have the carburetor number. It's very important because before we open our carb kit, we need to check the specification sheet and ensure that that carb number applies to this kit. And in our case, it does right here. And this sheet also gives you all the specifications, and it comes with the carburetor repair kit. So we're in good shape that way. So now it's time to start taking things apart. So we're going to get set up, get some screwdrivers and things out, and start disassembling. Okay, what becomes really important at this point is cleanliness. We need to keep everything spotless. If we don't, then we're going to end up with carburetor trouble down the road from contamination. So we clear our work area and we start disassembling, carefully laying out all the parts as we go. That way when it comes time to put it back together, we've got everything we need where we need it. Okay, and now we begin. Now we carefully lay all this stuff out. It's real easy to make a mistake and wind up with a huge problem. So we're going to go slowly and carefully as we rebuild the carburetor. Now this one has obviously not been apart for a very, very long time. Everything on it is really stiff and gummed up. So there we go. And we're just going to keep going here at Real Builds, pulling these screws. It's going to take a bit of time. So rather than bore you with endless amounts of me spinning screws, we're going to take a break as I get the screws out. Now, you'll notice we've laid out all the screws from the top part of the body here and the bottom part of the body here. We've laid them out carefully so we know exactly how it goes back together when we're done. Now, all it takes is a little light pressure on the carb body, and I mean light, to just pop the lower plate loose. Once it's upside down, we very carefully take it off, noting how the levers and rods go. Don't drop these little darlings. Keep everything in its place all the way through the process. Now we take off the lower gasket and keep everything at this point to make sure the right parts are going back on. Check for additional screws. Not seeing anything. And they do hide screws in the damnedest places, so be very, very careful. And it looks like we're good. So now, to pry the top and bottom apart. Gently. And it's a pain, but everything has to be done very gently. You're dealing with cast aluminum and pot metal parts. And a screw up will really make a mess. And as you can see, this one has been together for a very long time. So it's going to be a little bit challenging to get her apart. So while we're doing this, we'll give you another short break. And we'll keep working. This is going to take a little while. But you can see what we're doing. Very slowly, very carefully taking everything apart. And it's really important that you do it slowly and carefully and lay out the parts so you can find them all again and know how they go back together. So we're going to get this top part off and we'll be back at Real Build. Okay, as I said, you got to watch for screws. And we did miss a couple. They were buried way down in this area. And we had to find them through the top of the throttle plate. They were right in here. So that's why you have to be so cautious and so gentle when you're dealing with these. There's stuff hidden. And keep your eyes open, lay things out carefully. Now we have the top off. We can get a look. Oh my, there's enough filth in here to go for a long time. We're going to lay the pieces out so that we can come back when it's time to reassemble. So we're just going to keep going. Slowly and easily, and retaining all the old parts because we have to make sure they're correct when the new ones start going back in. And again, we got something stuck here, not sure what yet. We're going to get the accelerator pump out, set it in place, and then work our way around to find what's holding stuff down. Patience is a huge virtue. There we go. Slow and easy. And again, save everything so we can compare afterwards. Make sure we've got the right parts going back in. So there we go. We've had to disconnect the choke from the upper part as well already. And it's slowly coming together. Actually coming apart. But again, that's why we have to go slowly and carefully all the way through this, because it's so easy to make an error and break something. So we're going to keep going. And again, going slowly and carefully. Follow your service manual. That's why we have them. And just keep working it along. And if you find something like I think we just did that's seized, well, you got to work around that too. Slowly and carefully. Wow, there is enough muck and garbage in this poor thing to make for a really long day. But as we slowly take it apart, we're going to find all the pieces that need to be dealt with. This is your float and your needle. The seat is down in here. Go. And we're just going to keep going slowly and easily to get it as far apart as we need to get the new components in. So we're going to keep going here at Real Builds. Once we get it all the way down, we're going to take it back out and clean it up in the solvent again. So you keep going, we'll keep going, we'll be back in a few minutes here at Real Builds. Okay, we've pretty much got the carburetor knocked down now. Don't see much point in removing these plates. Shafts and everything seem to be in good condition. So we're going to set this aside to go back in the solvent and soak for a while so we can get it clean. This is the main body. Now what you have to be careful of here is when you're taking things like the jets out, which are really tiny, you will find jets like this one and ports like this one where there was a teeny tiny ball underneath. And you have to make sure you capture that ball and you know where it goes back. Then we have air jets, vents. We've got all kinds of stuff. You have to be really, really careful. Now, take a good look at just how filthy that carb body is. It's horrible. It's got decades of ugly growth in there. So we've got to get this all cleaned out, and the only way to do that is to get her back in the solvent and have her soak and clean out really well. But you have to be careful. Lose something now, you got a mess. So one step at a time, go slowly, find all the pieces, get them out, and get them clean. So we're going to continue to do that. Part of this was separating these jets from the secondary throttle plate. All this stuff has to be cleaned up, and it takes time. So, not money, time, and some solvent. So we're going to keep going and get into the cleanup process. When we're ready to go back together, we'll get together here at Real Builds. Okay, this is where we do the cleaning. And a collection of old pots and things that I've acquired over the years. You can do the same. Big bucket for holding the parts that are soaking. And a selection of different brushes, brass or plastic. Never steel, because you can damage the pot now. And we just keep scrubbing away. We've got to make sure every port, every passage is clean. If it's not going to run right. So this will take a couple hours. We're going to keep cleaning. You do the same. Find yourself some fine wire, like the stuff from inside a pipe cleaner, and go through each and every passage as you're doing the overall cleanup. When you're done, it should look almost like new. It should be as clean as you would have if you were working on a computer. And on that note, we'll keep going here on Real Builds. We'll be back when the cleaning's done. Okay, it's Sunday morning. Time to get hard back at it. And the first thing I have to do is apologize for a screw up on my part. Last night I came out to the garage with my 11-year-old son, and we were going to tidy up to get ready for today. And he wanted to see how the carburetor was, so I was showing him the pieces of the carburetor, and an hour and a half later the carburetor was assembled. Now, it's not as bad as it sounds as long as you're following the service manual and the instructions that come with the kit. It's not brain surgery, it just takes patience. But the big thing is to make sure everything's clean like we were showing you. Dirt's a carburetor's enemy. Dirt, grime, buildup, it's gotta be clean. And that's the tough part of building a carburetor. And while you're doing that, before you start assembly, make sure you check that the throttle plates and the throttle shafts are still tight. If there's any appreciable amount of looseness, time to take it to a shop to have them have a look at the shafts. And worst case, if they're worn out, it's time for a carburetor. But in this case, I think we've got a good carburetor. It's been a long time since I overhauled one, and it can be a little bit tricky, so we'll be getting to that shortly. Now, before we do that, we're going to finish checking out the engine bay. So, what we want to be looking for are broken lines, damaged sensors, damaged plug-ins. We want to go through everything around the carburetor and on the top of the engine so that everything's ready to go back together. And to do that, we need to look at all the hoses, all the sensors, and all the plug-ins. Now, we did that a little earlier, and lo and behold, we have a problem child. And that's this sensor right here. Now, if you look close, you'll see that the prior owner managed to break the tangs off the sensor, which is a big problem because now this sensor doesn't work. So we need to take it off and get a replacement, which could be a little tricky on a Sunday morning. And we've checked everything else that we can find. Everything else looks good. Everything else seems alright. But what we have learned is one of the prior owners thought he was a mechanic, and he left us some work to do. Part of it was with the carburetor. That poor thing was so filthy, and there was so much stuff jammed up inside it, little wonder it didn't want to run properly. Spark plug wires we've already been through, rotor cap. So the last steps are replacing that sensor, and then getting down and dirty, and getting the carburetor back on, lines hooked up, and everything checked. So we're going to pop that off here at Real Builds. It's not difficult. It's one wrench and taking it off, and then we got to go see if we can find one on a Sunday morning. Now we're going to use the crescent wrench from our small tool kit, no cheating, and get in there and pop that out. Now hopefully it isn't too tight. If somebody's really wrenched that in there, we may have to take a trip and see if we can borrow a wrench. But for now, we'll give it a shot with the crescent. We'll get in there and there we go. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than smart. And there's the piece we got to go find. Now while we're out chasing parts, we're going to pick up some cleaner and a can of paint. And after we've got, when we get back, we're going to clean up the top of the engine a little bit, clean up the sides a little more, and we're going to give things a quick coat of paint. And we'll be showing you how to do that. Hopefully we'll have it all done here today on Real Builds. Okay, now we're back, but before we start installing, we're going to do a little cleaning. So we're going to grab our brushes. Go. And give things a good dab. Now I've already sprayed it down again with a degreaser, and we're going to try and get all the crud out of here. Not an engine that was particularly well cleaned. You know, it's funny when you're looking at how guys take care of their cars. This one underneath is great. The interior was let to go. And the body seems to have been let to go. But I think the worst is, it looks like, whether it's the fact that it went through a few hands while it was off the road, or just neglect, this poor thing had a real tough time in the engine bay. And even that's kind of weird, because the hoses and stuff are all in good shape. It's the mechanical side. So we'll deal with it. So far it's been not too bad. We're on budget. We're hanging in there. And we're going to get this clean, sorted, and do a little more cleanup today. Give her a little paint, make her pretty, make her something that we feel good about driving down the road. Now the beauty of doing work jobs like this at home are things like I was talking about with my son getting involved. And yeah, it meant I forgot to tape something, but that's why we call it Real Builds, because I make it real mistakes. But we had a lot of fun last night putting it together. And he learned a lot. He's turning into his own little gearhead, which is cool. But we also do other stuff. Like we'll be having a sanding party to get the vehicle sanded down, have a few friends over, drink some amber beverages, always in moderation of course, and enjoy ourselves. This is all about fun. This isn't a job. So
while we're on a budget, doesn't mean we can't enjoy ourselves and wind up with a good looking car on a minimal amount of dollars. And as with everything when we're cleaning up the engine, it's all about the details. Try and do a good job. Get it looking sparky. We'll grab one of our old rags. Wipe everything down. You'll notice we go through a lot of rags. That's part of the clean thing. If you can't see what you're doing, it's awfully tough to come up with a good job. So I do go through a lot of rags. I particularly like socks because I can get my hand right in them. They're great for getting into small places. Cotton is always best, but we use whatever we can find. This isn't Chip Foose or Can Dig It Customs. This is our backyard. So if you want to build a car like Can Dig It or Chip Foose, well, then you got to have a whole different level of gear. This is all about getting you interested in starting out or getting you back to it. Great way to have a father-son project. Have the buddies over. Remember how fast you used to be. Or maybe will be again. But the big thing is to enjoy yourself. If you're not having fun on a project like this, you're doing something wrong. And while we finish this up, and get it ready to be sparkled a little, we're going to let you be, and if you're building along with us, give you a chance to get your stuff done too. So as we finish off, I'm going to leave you here on Real Builds, and then we'll start installing parts in a short time.
Okay, so here we are. We've put the new sensor in, the one that we went out and had to get. We've cleaned up the engine a little bit. We've painted the engine bay with gloss black, okay, very carefully, using saran wrap to cover the hoses and a cardboard template to keep back from getting onto the other stuff. But other than that, not a lot of work, just time is always the thing. Taking the time to get the job done. Now we've also cleaned off the intake manifold. The carburetor is ready to go on. So it's time to start doing that. And it's much the same as when it came off. You're just doing it in reverse. First we put our base plate gasket on. And then our carburetor. Now for nuts and bolts. So we're going to do that up right now. Then we'll come back to show you hooking up the linkage. We're just doing the reverse of what we did to take it off. So again, not brain surgery, just takes a little time. Sure looks good, all nice and clean in there, doesn't it? And we'll come back just as soon as we've got the carb bolted down.